have my notes. I'm ready to go. Drunk as hell.
Hell yeah. Well, it's recording.
Recording? Here we are. Guys, welcome back to another episode. This time we have a name. Retrospective Gaming Club. Yeah, that's what it is, right? I changed it 4 times.
Yeah, that's right. No, you
Okay.
nailed it.
And yeah, there's only 2 of us here. But in the future, I think we're going to change it to where it's going to be random. So it could be like the 2 of us is going to be like the main event, but random people will come in here and there, right?
Maybe
That's
we'll have
kinda
like 6 people.
Yeah, for the
Fuck.
Game Awards, I think
Yeah.
we will do something like that. Hey, that would actually be cool if we recorded Game Awards and then put it on the podcast.
That would be cool.
So like Game Awards 2024 or whatever, every time.
That'd be a very, very long track to edit.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, so let's talk about where we've been since the last episode. So we recorded the first episode. It was a little long, and that was one of the main complaints we had, was a little long. So this episode will not be as long, and we're not going to do this intro very long. I meant to tell you this before we started, but yeah, we'll probably aim for like 5-10 minutes, and then we'll move into talking about the game.
Oh, great, because I had like 20 minutes of material set up for the intro.
For the game or
Yeah, so
for just stuff?
Just to talk about myself.
Oh, okay. Well, the outro could
and
be
then
short.
you can have the rest of the intro after that.
Yeah. But no, I do think the intro should still be like us talking about what we've been playing, and well, clearly you've been playing this, and so
Yeah. So, I mean, recently I've like the scoundrel that I am. I haven't been playing a lot of story based or anything like that. It's been mostly just Hearthstone Battlegrounds multiplayer sort of monkey brain games.
oh god.
Yeah, I know, but it's not WoW, and so I've recovered from that.
You're not playing WoW anymore?
Not currently, no.
Didn't they just release a new DLC for that? December. It came out in December, I guess.
Well, first of all, the term DLC proves that you are not a WoW head. But
Why?
yeah.
What do they call it? Expansion?
Yeah. X-Pack or
Yeah.
something like that. There's all these nerdy terms for it, but yeah, no, not really. They just came out with what they call a hardcore mode. I actually don't know if it's released yet or not. But I've been kind of tangentially keeping track of it. But yeah, so they came up with a hardcore mode, whereas essentially, if your character dies, it's a permadeath. Which, for anybody who's played WoW, you know how many times you die in that game, and so the idea of like a permadeath is pretty insane.
Why would you want that?
I don't know.
Like, what the fuck?
That's why I've only been tangentially tracking it.
Yeah.
I'm just not that interested in wasting that much time into something that goes away instantly.
MMOs, the point is to put a lot of hours into the characters, right?
That's right.
So like the permadeath defeats the purpose of an MMO, I think.
Yeah, I think it's probably got something to do with just like these games have been around since like 2007 or something like that.
Yeah.
2008. So the Wrath of the Lich King I think came out somewhere around there. But
It is crazy how long they've been going.
Yeah, and I think that people are just like, I'm bored now. And so Blizzard was basically like, okay, well, we're going to take your boredom. We're going to turn this game to 11, and good luck, bitches. And so that's kind of where we're at.
So let me understand this because I don't play this shit.
Mm-hmm.
They have 2 like things happening at the same time, like WoW Classic, and then they have the mains, like World of Warcraft going.
That's right. Yeah. So it's called retail, or the people have
Retail.
termed it retail. Yeah. So retail is the most current expansion. I guess. Yeah, sorry, I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about Dragonflight.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Not part of Classic. This is separate.
Yeah, sorry. So Wrath came out last year sometime. Dragonflight came out, I think, earlier this year, and that's the newest retail expansion. People seem to be really enjoying it, but for me, I don't really like retail as much. It's got a lot of creature comforts, a lot of quality of life improvements, but
Yeah.
overall, it's I don't know. It doesn't have the feel of old Warcraft, so.
Yeah, it just doesn't look appealing to me at all.
That's fair.
Every time I see it.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I'm like, holy shit. I mean, like, I remember Vepricus playing like Black Desert. Remember, I thought that
Yeah.
shit looked horrible too. Character customization looked cool, but I just think that I think MMOs, the point of like, and we talk about this all the time, but like the point continuously going and there's no end. There's like no end to the story. I guess there is an end to the story, but there's like no real end to the game. That to me like pushes me away. The only point of a game like that, in my opinion, is like something that's competitive, like shooters or fighting games. Then it's okay to kind of not have a story, even though it's nice to have story in shooters and fighting games as well. But like MMOs just feel like endless.
Yeah, I totally get that. And the funny thing about it is that a lot of people are attracted to that. The fact that you can pay $50-$60 or whatever for a game or for an expansion or something like that, and continuously get content out of it for essentially an unlimited amount of time, I think is really attractive to a lot of people. But and I get where you're coming from, because I didn't like MMOs for a long time.
Yeah,
we've talked about this before, but I kind of got tricked into playing it, and then once it got its claws into me, I kind of fell into that rabbit hole.
Yeah. I guess that's how open world games are for me anyway.
Yeah.
But like Tears of the Kingdom, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute, but it's just overwhelming. But I know that there could be an end, like as soon as I want, or it could take me 500 hours. It could be 60 hours, it could be 500 hours. But WoW is like, nope.
Yeah. I mean, there are people you can go when you're logged into a character or a tune or whatever people want to call it. You can do like I think it's /played into the chat, and it will return the amount of time that you have spent playing that character. And it's insane what people will put into it. Like it's literally like years of time over the past, I guess it's been out for 15 years now or something like that. Literally like a fifth of their waking hours has been spent playing that game. Just crazy.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember watching you play, and it was like all the shit on the screen, all the buttons you have mapped. It's just nasty. I don't even want to look at it.
Yeah. No, it'll trigger your like, I don't know, your tendency to want to like clean things and that sort of thing, like looking at that big mess across the screen. But the thing is, when you start playing that game, if you don't have that stuff, it's just so much more difficult to keep track of things. And so you add it on one little bit at a time until eventually you have a mess on the screen.
It's funny because I compare it to Twitch streamers. Like, you know how like now it's for video games, it's better now to have like a screen and like the gameplay incorporates the HUD kind of. WoW is like a fucking Twitch streamer who's just like, fuck it, I just want everything on the screen. Hey, just got a sub. Oh shit, there's all my chat. Oh, here's all this weird shit on my screen. Instead of it just being very like focused on the game, it's like, look at all this other shit. I don't want that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people who play WoW are like data nerds, and having data available to them at all times to keep track of how they're doing, what their damage output is, those sorts of things, how much overhealing they're doing or whatever, right? They want numbers. And so that's why you see all of those things across the screen, is to keep track of those numbers, and so that they can, live adjust how they're doing things to be able to, max or min-max the game, or I guess their input to the team. So yeah, it's a mess. It's a disgusting mess, but I love it.
Which it may sound elitist, but I think those people aren't really like gamers.
Wow, that is elitist. You're right.
They're literally like almost software like engineers.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's pretty much what it boils down to. I think I would venture a guess that like probably the majority of people who are still playing that game and still get enjoyment out of that game are probably like engineers.
Yeah. Funny enough, we should figure out how to do a poll so we can figure out how many people are like engineers that still play that game. I wonder if that's possible. I'm sure Blizzard could put something up. Which Blizzard just launched their other game, right? Diablo 4.
Yep.
You played that at all?
No, I'm not really interested.
You're not a Diablo guy, or you're not interested because of the controversy?
So no, I don't care about that. I wonder if they can pick up that train on the.
I think it'd be kind of cool if they
that
can.
Is kind of cool. In case you can't hear it, there's a train going by right now. It's very loud.
I live near a train.
Yeah. We're actually recording on a train. Shout out CSX.
I was going to say something else, so it's good that you said that. We're actually in the middle of a train.
Yeah, we're on a train running a train, actually. Yeah, so I don't know. I played Diablo 2 and I played Diablo 3. I bought both of those games and sunk maybe 4 hours into each of them. Like I love the idea of Diablo, but once I put it into practice and actually try to play the game, it's not that fun for me.
Weird, because I will say Diablo is the only Blizzard game other than Overwatch 1 that I got, or Diablo 3, that I got super, super invested in.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when it came out, so as you know, I barely was ever a PC gamer, so by the time Diablo 3 came out on PS3, I remember this. It came out on PS3. This was years after it had been out. And so I'd never played a Diablo game. And a bunch of friends of mine who were gamers on PC or whatever were like, oh, you have to play this game. Oh my God, it's finally on console. Because back then I was like, console, like, you remember how we met.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember.
It was probably around the same time. So I was really all about console. I was against PC. When you're younger, you always have that battle, so that you're like a PC master race or your consoles. And for me, it was about the classics, so you got more of that on like console. And PS3 finally got Diablo 3, and then all my friends talked me into getting it. I was like, you know what? Now that it came to PS3, why not? And so I bought it, and I got so obsessed with that game. I was like playing it with all the friends. We had four people going, and we would always do all like the raids and stuff like that. Or I don't remember what they were even called.
That's right.
But we would go and like we would discover random shit. I remember like playing that game and discovering like this random rainbow like weird area. It's like a dark game, but then you found this like really colorful like rainbow, like unicorns and shit area, and I was like, what the fuck? And the game was so crazy because after you beat it, and we figured out like some glitch where you could like max your characters out, and so we would get crazy. We would start fucking doing all this crazy shit. You'd want to play it over and over again because you could travel, like bring your characters over for New Game Plus. I got obsessed with that shit. And so Diablo 4, when it was coming out, I was like, oh my God, I might have to get this.
Yeah.
Sadly, it came out around the same time as Street Fighter, so I didn't. But my brother's been playing. He's saying it's the same experience.
Yeah, and that's like we were saying about the rainbow level. That's kind of what I enjoy about Blizzard in general is a lot of times they don't, not a lot, in their MMOs or in their like RPG games rather, a lot of times they don't take themselves super seriously. And so there's a lot of fun little Easter eggs that they kind of throw in for you to experience. And yeah, it makes it seem a little bit less serious, especially for a game that people take way too seriously. So
yeah, and like with Diablo 2, it's like, because it kind of reminds me of WoW with the way the camera is and everything like that. So it's kind of based on that. But I think what makes Diablo more fun is that they have a story mode, and the co-op system is like, it's not just everybody all in. Like, I don't know how WoW exactly works. Maybe I should just sit down and play it one day instead of talking shit about it all the time.
Sure.
But like the fact that you can like just team up with like 4 people, you have classes. And it's like that is like you can go through the entire campaign with those 4 people. To me, that's the more appealing thing. It's like, because we both love It Takes Two. It's like I love the idea of like a game you're experiencing with another person, like all the way through from start to finish. You just have this experience together. You talk about the same exact moments. Maybe the way that you experience those moments is different, but you talk about the same moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really cool. Can't really do that with WoW because it's like crack cocaine. It's all over the fucking place. It's wild, and there's too much shit. So you can't just stick with one person the entire time.
There's some truth to that. When you're talking about especially at the rating level, and you've got 15, 30 people, there is a lot of stuff going on. And I've played with friends, and we don't really communicate during the raids because you're listening to the raid leader. And they're instructing people on what to do, when to do it, and that sort of thing. Like live, they're calling out like mages do this, whatever, and so you can't really communicate, and so you do lose some of that personal touch. But I will say that what you would probably enjoy, which is one of the things that I enjoy most about WoW, is the like questing leveling experience, which it probably, if you're playing it casually, it'll take you, depending on what like expansion you're playing, it'll take you a month, 2 months, pretty easily to like go all the way through the leveling experience. And so you can have really good time. And like, my wife and I, we have a really good really good memories that we built by just like going through the leveling experience together. And I was basically like damage output, and she was healing,
Yeah.
right? And so like we had this cooperative experience going all the way through it, and so that does exist in WoW. But the stuff that you saw does not
Yeah.
does not entail that. So I certainly don't blame you for having that perspective. But I would say that if there is a free weekend, or I think you can play up to like level 10, something like that, for free, I highly recommend it.
That's what they're doing with Final Fantasy now too. The
Oh, yeah.
14, you can play that up to like level 10 or 20 or something like that for free. So,
Cool.
and of course, that one looks more appealing, but I'll give anything a shot once. So maybe I'll play WoW one day. That way I can keep talking shit about it, but like have the experience. Of
Yeah,
talking
there
shit
you
about
go.
it. But I did want to talk about one other thing in this intro before we move into actually talking about the video game we're going to be talking about, which the episode will be labeled so people will already know, but we haven't even mentioned what game we're going to be talking about. But I want to talk about Zelda a little bit while we're here.
Of course.
Because you said your wife's trying to get you to buy it real bad. And I've kind of been sleeping on it a little bit, and I want to talk about that a little bit, why, and walk into that as well. But if the internet hasn't heard, like, the sequel to Breath of the Wild is out. And it's not called Breath of the Wild 2, which is what everybody thought it would be called, but it's called Tears of the Kingdom. And it really should be called Breath of the Wild 2. It literally looks just like it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it does play differently, but it has the same mechanical systems and the same graphical, like the same type of graphics. But I wanted to talk about Tears of the Kingdom because in a way it's kind of funny enough, you're talking about like leveling systems and leveling up and stuff like that. It's funny how big this game is, and there is no leveling system.
Yeah.
It's just, that's the beauty about Zelda, is like everybody's always like, oh, well, Zelda kind of rests on that line where people consider it maybe sometimes they'll want to consider it an RPG, but it's not an RPG. It's just an action adventure game where you put on a bunch of different shit. It is a role-playing game in a weird way. You're role-playing Link, but it's not RPG. It's never been.
Yeah, because you're not forced to go through any sort of like leveling process, like you were saying. So
Yeah.
you can play the game in any way that you want to, whereas in other RPGs you're forced to go through a certain path, basically.
Yeah, and I think about these massive JRPG worlds that I'm always exploring, like with Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy and stuff like that. And yeah, Zelda is very much different because sure, you can put Link in all these different, I almost called him Zelda. Wow.
Oh,
fucking
yeah, you
in
got
me.
burned at the stake for that one.
Yeah. You can put him in all these different clothes and equip different weapons and stuff like that, but it's different. It's different, and because it is one adventure and everyone's having the exact same experience, like, yeah, you're getting more hearts and stuff like that, and you could argue that's your kind of leveling system, is the stamina and the hearts, but it's not an RPG, which it always feels like it is. Breath of the Wild always felt like it was a little bit, but I wanted to talk about how overwhelming it is. Two things that are overwhelming. One, watching the Xbox conference on the Starfield shit. I don't know if you watched it or not.
Mm-mm.
You should have. It was 45 minutes of them showing you how fucking massive Starfield was going to be. And and I was getting overwhelmed. I was like, God. I actually got overwhelmed for the first time ever watching a video game event. I was like, how the fuck are they expecting anyone to play this? Seriously, there's like over 1,000 planets and all this shit. And the reason I thought about that is because I thought about it, Tears of the Kingdom. And this is a great, thing about video games is, yeah, you do get to escape and like the massive worlds you get to explore and do all this crazy shit with. But sometimes it is a little much. You know what I mean? Like sometimes there's so much that it's overwhelming. Like Tears of the Kingdom, when I first started playing it, I was like, holy shit, I hadn't played Breath of the Wild since like 2018. That was the last time I played it.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back into, or coming back into that type of game and to that world that world of Link, I at first was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. Like I'm so, horny, as I would say. I was so ready. And then it just started weighing on me. It's like, how many Korok seeds are in this one? How many fucking temples are there? How many fucking shrines and how many caves are there? And then I started like looking at the map, and then I started realizing there's not just one map this time. Breath of the Wild had one map. This has 3 maps, and then you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, the game it stops losing its I guess like at its core, the fun, basically. You're turning it into like a task, into a job essentially, to complete a game to its I guess to complete everything in the game, and it's nice to have a game that just kind of like starts and stops somewhere. I guess this wraps back around to WoW, right?
Yeah.
It's nice to have something that starts and stops and is manageable. Because if you have too many things to do, like you're saying, overwhelming is a really good word for it. It starts to feel like a chore, basically. And at that point, if you're not enjoying a game, then there's no reason to play it.
Yep.
Right?
And we're grown men.
We're grown men.
We got full-time jobs. Like looking at the shit like this, especially with all the games that I want to play this year. Like they keep stacking up. It was funny because I looked at, so I'm playing Tears of Kingdom. I'm trying to wrap it up. There's still so much shit. I haven't even barely touched it. I mean, it feels like that anyway. I'm about to finish Street Fighter 6, but I was looking at the games I'd completed for 2023. I've completed like 8 games this year. Only one of them came out this year.
Yeah.
I started thinking about it and I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, fuck, shit. Yeah. I got to beat more games this year because I do like to talk about the games that came out this year for the Game Awards and stuff like that. So it's fun. And that's why I was telling you the other day, hey, I'm going to give you some more shit you need to play because I also need to play it. And it'll be good to hold each other accountable, which is one of the games is going to be Hi-Fi Rush. I think we should both play that by the end of the year.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be nominated for a lot of awards. But yeah, it gives you anxiety. And I think with that being said, I think that's a good point to lead into talking about like the gameplay and the narrative and stuff of Celeste because a lot of it deals with anxiety. That's kind of the point of this game.
That's a great segue, by the way. And
Yeah.
most of my notes are written about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a great game because, and funny enough, over the years, yes, everyone, we're talking about Celeste. We're going to be talking about Celeste for the next 45 minutes. So it's funny how long. So I want to talk about my story with this game before we start like actually talking about this game, which I guess talking about my story with this game is talking about this game, whatever. So I played this game when it came out. So I played it in 2018. And the reason I played it, actually a couple months after it came out. So I just finished God of War, and that was a good one.
Beautiful game.
Yeah. And so I finished that game, and I was on my Switch, and I can't remember who it was. There was someone in my life. They're no longer in my life that I think of. But either way, this person was telling me.
I'm sad. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very sad. This whole thing's going to be sad.
Great.
But someone was in my life. They told me, hey, I was looking for something new to play because I'd played. 2017 was one of the biggest years of video games ever. I don't know if that was the case for you, but it was for me. Like there was so much shit that came out in 2017. I was still catching up halfway through 2018, if not the entire time. So I was catching up on stuff in 2017, in 2018, and I was trying not to play anything from 2018. And then someone was like, hey, you got to play this game that came out in, like, I think it was January. I think Celeste came out in January. Can't remember, but I think it was January. So I was like, all right. So I'll play it. They talked me into it. They were like, this is the best platformer I've ever played. That's what they told me.
That's a huge,
yeah,
huge shoes to fill.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck did you just say? I was like, it's the best platformer you've ever played. And so I was like, all right. I will give it a shot. And everyone was talking about this game at one point. Mm-hmm. Seriously, everyone was talking about this game. I
remember, yeah.
Yeah, and it was getting overwhelming, and I was like, okay. As someone who plays video games, as someone who constantly is like always trying to play like, everything that looks appealing to me in a year, I can't just ignore the fact that some random little indie game that came out in January of 2018, I can't just ignore it anymore. I have to play it. So I did. And so walk into our experience with Celeste, I started playing the game, and first thing I noticed was something we'll talk about later, but there was, for the gameplay and the narrative, I think it was fairly simple, but it was simple in a really fantastical way. So it's like it builds up. It starts this story of Madeline, and she's basically, I think from the beginning, you kind of already know the character's dealing with anxiety and depression, and she's trying. Basically, I guess the way she's trying to heal this, you tell me. It's been a while since I played it, but the way she's trying to like kind of deal with these things and these issues she's dealing with is to climb a mountain called Celeste. And that's the reason the game is called Celeste, because you're trying to climb this mountain called Celeste. And It's level based, which I love. This like it reminds me of old school video games where you go out into a menu and you see each level and then you're like, oh, next one, you know. And that's kind of the way it like deals with it. So and she's going through these levels, and that's kind of it for the story for a while. That's kind of it for a while. And you've recently played this, so if you have anything you want to say about like kind of how it begins, because if I remember correctly, it just kind of goes in, and you're just kind of there as Madeline, and then you start to kind of go up, and then she starts running into friends, and then that's kind of revealing more of the story as you go.
Yeah. So near the very beginning of the game, you run into an old lady. She's like the old crazy lady, basically.
Right. Yeah, I remember. Okay.
Yeah, and she's basically like asking you if you're sure you want to go and try to climb this mountain. She's like, I don't know if you got it in you. Are you sure you want to do this? And Madeline is basically like shrugging her off, calling her a crazy old lady and that sort of thing. And yeah, you're right. They very, very close to the beginning of the game, they very clearly tell you through, if I remember correctly, it's a phone call back to Madeline's making a phone call back home, calls her mom, and the first thing her mom asks her is if she's having a panic attack.
Right. Oh, yeah. Wow. It's all coming back to me.
Yeah. So it's very, very early in the beginning when they bring that up, but it wasn't, at that time at least, it didn't feel like it was a huge plot point, I guess. All I knew was climb this mountain, it's going to be really hard, basically. that's like all I got from the very beginning of the story.
Yeah.
And also, like, this person has panic attacks. That's fine. Like, a lot of people have panic attacks, or like her mom might just be, being overly cautious or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, and I that's one of the things that I loved about the narrative in this game. And I agree with you. It's very simple, but very very effective. And myself having personal experience with anxiety, it actually affected me in a really great way. And I don't know if we want to dive straight into that or not, but we'll probably touch on this a little bit later. But the general kind of moral of the story was learning basically to live in harmony, with your anxiety or with your depression, whatever sort of mental health things you're going through. A lot of people deal with those too, and one of the main things that I've learned over the past couple of years going through therapy has been that the more you try to fight this thing, it's a current basically, and you're fighting against this current all the time. And the more you try to fight against it, the worse it's going to get for you. But if you can find a way to harness those emotions, those feelings, the extra chemicals that your brain is pumping, if you can harness those, you can actually use them to propel yourself even further. So you swim with the current rather. And some of the things that they did in this game were very, very effective on me and touched me emotionally. So yeah, I love that part of it.
And same here, because like it's funny, because like when I first played the game in 2018, it was a lot different. Even though it wasn't that long ago, I feel like I've definitely, like a Pokemon, evolved in the last I don't know how, is that 5 years? I hope not.
Yeah,
Jesus
right.
Christ.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, 5
You nailed
years.
it too, by the way. I looked it up. It was January 25th, 2018.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I have a weird thing about like dates on video games.
Sure, yeah.
I know when games came out. Like,
Well, it's because the video games like affect, or you have something going on in your life at that point, right? And I do the same thing with like music or whatever. I can remember that, I don't know, like NSYNC's No Strings Attached album came out in like 2011 or 2012 or something. Sorry,
is
not
that how
2012,
soon?
2002, something like that. Sorry.
I was like, wait.
No, sorry, I was 10 years off. But yeah, so like I do the same thing because I'm like, okay, I was listening to that album when it came out, and I was at this point in my life, and so I can kind of nail it down like that too.
Yeah, and so 5 years ago, Jesus Christ. Okay,
Yeah.
so 5 years ago, I was in a very different place in my life, and actually, 5 years ago, definitely dealing with anxiety more than I had. It was 1 year before I started working the job I'm working now.
Mm-hmm.
It was 1 year before that. And I was struggling with anxiety really, really bad in 2019. So 2018, it was like I was pretty much ignoring all my problems. I didn't believe in therapy or any of that shit, which is not a good thing. And
I didn't either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so it's crazy because I back then it was like playing games like that. Sometimes you didn't notice some of the small little things in games like that when you don't give a shit. You know
for
what I mean?
sure. Yeah.
And so in 2018, I just didn't give a shit. So some of the reasons that I love Celeste weren't due to some of the themes until later. Until like it was like 2020 or 2021, COVID just popped, and I remember like kind of revisiting the game in a way, and I remember finding so many things that because it won so many awards that year at the Game Awards, and I remember revisiting because I was like, it is one of the most, and I mean this is a bold statement, but one of the most out of the last like 20 years of gaming that I have done, and I've only been alive 29 years, it's one of the most addictive video games I've ever played. Seriously, like when I was playing it, it was like so addictive. I would want to go back and redo levels and re-go through them, and I think that kind of speaks to the themes in a way. You know what I mean? Because like you struggle, you have like with anxiety. It's how do you calm yourself down with anxiety? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I feel like the game's gameplay is playing a part to anxiety in a
100%.
weird ass way.
100%. Yeah.
And that was so sick to me. And I remember doing that in 2020 and I, like coming back to it and going, holy shit. Like I wish I could replay every video game ever played as I am now.
Yeah.
As I am now. Because like you respect and you have so much more appreciation for like things and small little details when you get older.
100%. Yeah. And like I was saying, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No,
or anything,
please.
But, same thing for me because having had gone through therapy, recently, I don't think that this game would have had the same kind of effect on me before that, because the way that I had dealt with it for so long was to fight it, and the fact that this game was the whole point of this game was to teach you that going along with it and working with it rather would help you more was that was the antithesis of what I thought how you're supposed to deal with anxiety. And so I don't think it would have had as profound of an effect on me pre-therapy, and pre-understanding these things about myself that it does now.
Yeah. And I think funny enough, I think we were on opposite sides of how we experienced this game.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool, actually.
Yeah. So I mean, something that I really love that they did in the game is splitting Madeline into basically two forms, right? You have Madeline, the physical being, essentially, and then at some point in the game, it splits you off, and what people have started calling Battlein. Right?
I did see that recently.
Yeah.
I never knew that. I always thought it was like the other you or the mirror Madeline.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So I think she introduces herself as part of you, essentially. Like that's her. I think when she first pops up, that's actually like the name that they put under her. So, and so yeah, I kind of think that Battlein is like I think it's a bad name for her because
yeah, it's funny.
Like it's
Battlein.
Obviously, that's not the official name that they gave her. That's what like the people who have enjoyed Celeste and have followed it and that sort of thing, they have kind of collectively, culturally started calling her Battlein. But like I said, I think that even because the game is trying to teach you that she's not bad. And at some point, she says something like, I wish I could get rid of you, right? Like Madeline is talking to her face to face and saying like, I just want you to leave me alone. I want you to go away. And Battlein is responding by basically just being like, I am the only thing protecting you. Like I am babysitting you all the time, and you're just trying to get rid of me. And so, I don't know. Looking back on it, like at the time, I kind of knew what was going on, but it wasn't until that one scene, and I've got a note to talk about this later, but it's a good time to bring it up.
Yeah.
There's that one scene where you get into a gondola with that Theo.
Oh, I remember this. Yep.
Yeah, so Theo's an NPC that you run into. For background, he's basically like he's obsessed with his social media presence, and he's constantly like worried about whether he's got enough followers and that sort of thing. Really nice guy, helps you out. But you get onto a gondola together. You get onto a gondola together, and as you're riding up, all of a sudden the gondola stops. It gets stuck in place, and then you find out, or you see, or Madeline rather, like on top of the gondola, like she has stopped it, and you get to watch Madeline go into a panic attack. I'll come back to this a little bit later because there's something very, very specific about that kind of cutscene that I want to talk about. But what was really, really, really cool was Theo, once he realizes that you're having a panic attack, he like gets on his knees beside you and he's like, "You're having a panic attack. I'm going to show you something that my grandfather taught me."
Beautiful.
And that's when the screen basically goes black, and then there's just a feather that's like floating in the middle of the screen. And he says, "I want you to imagine a feather in your head, like in your mind's eye, and I want you to just breathe and keep that feather afloat. Don't let that feather touch the ground." Basically,
It's giving me goosebumps just thinking about it.
Yeah.
I remember this. That's
well,
crazy.
dude, it was just like, because one of the things that I also learned in dealing with anxiety is breathing techniques.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I use almost on a daily basis. If I feel it starting to kind of bubble up, I can immediately recognize it and use a very similar technique. But taking, or I guess creating a visual of a feather trying to float, and then at that point, the game actually forces you to play a little mini game where this like this feather is falling to the ground, and then you have to press a button, and like it starts blowing air up, and you get the feather to float, and it gets you to keep this feather like inside of this box. And there's a really, really cool thing that they do in the sound. We'll talk about that when we get to sound. But I forgot why we got onto this onto this, but
because Battling lands on top of it.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so Battlin's up on top of it, and the fact that they split that character out and made her into a character, an NPC rather, and actually like something that you can interact with was really interesting to me, because that's almost how you should think about anxiety or depression, that sort of things. It's like, it's not, it's part of you, right? And most of us, our natural instinct, our natural reaction is to fight that thing and try to split it away from our being and get rid of it.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I'd say that most people have dealt with anxiety at some point. It's always somewhere within us, right? As human beings, we have that monkey brain side of us that wants to be anxious and worry about stuff all the time. What you cannot do is you cannot get rid of that, and that's okay. That's the whole point of this game. That's okay. If you can learn to work with it, it actually can work to your benefit.
Yep.
Having anxiety is good, and a lot of time, and it's left over basically from us being monkeys at some point, essentially, right? Like cavemen, where we had to constantly be heightened, or our senses constantly had to be heightened, and we always had to worry about whether there was some animal nearby, a lion that could kill us or something like that. Now we live in a nice, comfortable little apartment. And we have all of our essentials taken care of: food, water, comfortable place to sleep, shelter, that sort of thing.
But that part of us still exists.
It's still there.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And you can't get rid of it, and nor should you. You just have to learn how to harness it and use it.
Yep. And that, it's funny because we're talking about Battling, and we're talking about like the anxieties of the game, and that kind of brings up one of the main parts that I do want to talk about with the game, because this is when I knew that I loved the game. I liked the game a lot when I was playing it. This is when I knew I loved the game. And it actually, at the time, again, revisiting the game, I rediscovered these things, and I realized even more reasons to love the damn game. And it like helps in so many ways, like dealing with anxiety and shit like that. But there was it was funny. It was the year 2018. God of War just launched, and so I just finished it not too long before I'd played this, and I thought, man, there is nothing that's going to come out that's going to be more impressive than Kratos just beating the shit out of Boulder. And so I'm playing Celeste, I'm loving it, and it's, I'm really liking the game, and I get close to the end. I get close to the end, and there's this kind of sequence that happens with battling where if I remember correctly, this is near the very end of the game where she starts to she's either running or she's chasing you or you're chasing her.
Yeah, so there's actually both. The earlier one is where she is chasing you.
This one you're chasing her though.
Yes.
Yes, this is the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because so there's no real bosses in the game. I mean, there are, but like they do it in a certain way where it doesn't feel like traditional boss fight in a platformer. But this one felt like a boss fight. This one was really, really epic. You're chasing, you're trying to get to battling. I don't
firing projectiles at you.
Yeah, you're dodging all this stuff. And at this point of the game, since we're talking about the gameplay, you become so damn good. You've become so good at it. Hopefully, some people may have not have, but at this point, I was very good at the game. And I'm flying through all of this shit. It's happening so fast. We're gonna talk about it later, but the music and everything that's happening up to this point, you're blown away. I remember I was with some friends when I was playing this part, and I was like, holy shit, this actually might be the game of the year. Like, this is insane.
Yeah.
And I remember finishing that scene, like, it takes forever. It feels like you're doing this forever. You're really not doing it forever, but it feels like it.
Yeah.
You're going through this shit. You're chasing after battling. It seems like it is going on forever. But at the same time, I don't know if you've ever played Ori and the Blind Forest.
Yeah.
But it's very similar to the end, right? Remember that at the end you're going through all that crazy shit and you have to do it all in kind of one sequence. To me, it was like I never wanted it to end. I was like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
This is so sick. Like everything, the way it's kind of coming together. I just need it to stay here right now, like forever.
Yeah, you could. So it's funny because my wife actually walked in when I was in the middle of that quote unquote boss battle.
Yeah,
and she was she started talking to me. She could not have ripped me away from that game physically if she tried at that point, because I was like, no, this is like this. Our relationship is very important. I love you very much. You're my sun and my moon. But God damn it, do not distract me from this right now. Yeah, I agree. That was an incredibly awesome part of the game.
Yeah, and it proves that video games are like, you can love video games more than you can love human beings.
I have proven that.
She's gonna be listening to it. Oh yeah, I'm gonna kill him. No, but yeah, there's no way you can be pulled apart from the game at that moment.
Yeah, and
they're so awesome.
I think there are multiple parts of this game that are like that.
Yes,
I wanted to touch on something that you brought up a minute ago about I guess something that I wanted to mention was that it's immediately apparent when you play this game that the developers are gamers.
Yes,
because the way that they introduce new mechanics to you is so methodical and perfectly timed.
Yeah,
you'll basically like go into a new environment, a new level, and they won't give you, like, every once in a while they'll show you like a, hey, press X to dash or whatever, but it's very, very in the very beginning. Rather, what they do is they just add something in there and you have to experience it, right?
Yep.
So you have like those kind of like thwomper block things, and then you just like go to jump on it, and you realize that when you jump onto it, all of a sudden it's rocketing in the direction that you jumped on it from.
Yeah.
And so like if anybody hasn't played this game yet, number one, do. Number two, sorry for the spoilers. I guess we'll put a little thing at the beginning of this just to make sure that everybody knows. Yeah, there's a lot of spoilers. But no, I forgot my point.
No, yeah, that they're gamers and that they're kind of showing you through gameplay.
Yeah, and so you you jump onto something and it will, you kind of like, you die like 1,000 times. Actually, more than that. I think I died 4,000 times playing, like, getting to the end of this game.
4,000?
I think so. I have to go back.
Or is it 400?
No. It was definitely in the thousands.
Jesus.
I know I died more than you did, because before this started, we had the game up, and Liquid was going through the menus, and it actually keeps a death counter as like and the funny thing is, it's kind of like a point of pride in a way.
Yeah, and it's a fun thing. It's
fun.
It
is. And when it gets to the end and it rolls credits, it gives you those stats like, hey, you did this many things so many times and whatever, and it also tells you how many times you died. But the funny thing is the way, again, going back to how the developers are obviously gamers, they made a game so that you can die this many times and not even realize it. It's
Yeah.
not a big deal because they made the loading time so short, and everything is so fluid that you basically die and you don't even feel bad about it. It's like, okay, it's me being stupid, and then
Yeah.
like you try it again.
And how would you explain this? Like each, I guess, frame, is it a frame? Each time you enter a new screen, you're just resetting there,
Right? Yeah, it's a
which
checkpoint.
is so great.
That's beautiful,
Yeah.
and that's also a part of the rewarding side of this game is that you try and it takes you 100 deaths to get through one frame, and then you finally get to the end of it, and it's the biggest sigh of relief where it's like, I did it. I don't have to do it again. Like it's just so satisfying.
Yeah, and that was the main, like, gameplay wise, that was the main thing where I was like, this is amazing. Like, because like it sets you up to where you're seeing each screen and you look at that screen, you're seeing all the shit, you're seeing all the like obstacles you're going to have to go through, but you only have to make it through that screen.
Right.
And then you're good.
Yeah.
On to the next challenge. It's like puzzle after puzzle. Each frame is a puzzle. And then you figure that out.
That's a good way of putting it, yeah.
And I think it was a beautiful thing. I was
Yeah,
like,
and
this is making the gameplay so addictive.
And they changed the frames so that's, sometimes a frame will be just the screen, right? Like the one
Yeah.
screen, you could see the whole thing, and then you work it out in your head, and you're like, okay, I see how to do this. And you keep trying that. Maybe you have to adjust a little bit, but then you get through it. There are other levels where it doesn't show you the rest of that frame until you've gotten to some point. And all of a sudden, you're exposed to all these other obstacles that you actually have to react to in real time, which is really difficult, but also like, it's challenging, but it's very, very rewarding. And there were times where I found myself in like a flow state. It was like I was so well connected with the controls that I'd go jump into some unknown, and then the frame would move as I'm moving, and then I would see the things in front of me and calculate it instantly.
Yep.
So I'd be like, I know what to
so
do.
Weird.
Boom, 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 boom. And like without ever stopping, I go through the whole frame, and it's just like after that's done, dude, I need a cigarette. Like,
yes.
It feels so good.
Yeah. And I mean I got so addicted to collecting, like at one point I will say I kind of gave up like mid game because some of them were so damn hard. But the collecting the strawberries, you kind of want to do it because you're like, oh my God, like I wonder what it's like to get down there, and like and it's all on one screen, so it just gets very, very addictive. And some of it makes it very challenging because some of the strawberries you can't get unless you just don't stand on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
They're flying. And so you have to get them by just flying through the level without touching the ground.
Yeah.
And that's the only way, or otherwise they'll fly off. And I thought that was so genius.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you're going to have to get really fucking good at this game if you want to collect everything.
And you do. Like, and
Yes.
that's, again, going back to what you were saying, the way that they introduced these new mechanics and something that was really, really cool about the game. And it's not unique to this game, but it felt this was one of the more rewarding times that I've seen it done. But they basically do like a victory lap sort of last level where they're now adding in all of these different mechanics that you've learned over the course of this game, over the course of different levels, because the different levels are all themed basically, and they have different interactive parts of the environment that do different things. And in the last level, they culminate all of that into one big level. And again, getting into that kind of flow state where I'm not just whereas before you could get into a flow state and say like, I know that this thing, like this cloud, if I bounce off of it, I can jump off of it once before it goes away, and then I can grab this wall, but this wall is going to fall if I do that sort of thing. Like maybe that is introduced to you in one level. At the end, you get that plus the thwomper things, plus now you've got like the walls that grow stuff when you touch it, and so like you have to tap back into that sort of flow that you had before, but you have to basically like you have to remember all of the different mechanics that you learned across the game to do it, and god damn is that rewarding, dude.
It's beautiful. Yeah,
it feels so good.
It does. And it's funny because you talk about themes, and I think that's a good kind of intro into like talking about like the graphics and the art direction here, which is absolutely gorgeous.
It is. It's beautiful. Yeah.
It's a beautiful game to look at, and it's crazy because I had a lot of notes on this because a lot of indie games have this thing where they love to model their game after a 16-bit video game. Because 16-bit was the juicy era of video games. Super Nintendo, one of my favorite consoles of all time. It's clearly like it's a great style to have. Like every indie game does it. Even like some of our favorites, like Undertale and shit.
Yeah.
Even though that's more NES, right? But 8-bit. But Celeste does it in a different way. I would say that Celeste, the way it looks, yes, it's 16-bit, but there's something about it, right? With the characters not having faces and like the way it's kind of animated, it almost looks like modern. Like some games when they do the 16-bit thing, they do look like they're old ass games. This looks like a modern 16-bit.
Yeah, and I think part of the way that they achieved that was they blended different styles of pixel art as well.
Yeah.
And so, all the gameplay, like you were saying, is like 16-bit. And so when you want the environment to be as low, like you don't want a lot of stuff going on, right? Like I just want the minimum knowledge of like what I need to do to get through this. I don't need a lot of stuff going on to like kind of take away from the gameplay experience. They give you that. But then outside of that, when they're doing the cutscenes or like I don't know what you call it, speaking bubbles and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
they actually switch to like a 64-bit or like a full resolution sort of.
And it kind of looks like
style.
I don't know if like what era of cartoon, but it looks like a cartoon.
Yeah, it does. It's like hand drawn.
Yeah, it's sick.
Yeah, and they I think that the blend of those was done seamlessly, and I think it was done purposefully. Like I said, just because. If everything looked like that when you were playing through it, I think a good example would be like Braid or something like that.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of a similar game, but done in full hand drawn. It would detract from the gameplay aspect of it and distract you basically. And so I appreciated the fact that they did that.
Yes, yeah, because Hades is another great example of that. The gameplay kind of looks just like the cutscene / bubble characters or whatever. But I think Celeste, it played really well with the 16-bit in the gameplay because like with the style that they were using, like particles, like when the snow's flying by and stuff like that, it's just so welcoming in a weird way. It's like, I don't even know how to explain it. It was just like, I was like, I want to see more. I want to see like what that next level looks like.
Yeah.
Because like, I remember one level in particular, it's like, I think it's like the second area you get to. It's like yellow and pink. And those are the themes, yellows and pinks. And the sky and the winds are blowing.
Yeah.
They're pushing you back and you have to keep making it through the level. And I was just like, the underground levels are beautiful too, but like this area, I was like blown away. I was like, this looks, and I remember like actually making a comment like this back in 2018 when I first played it. I was more like, even though this is 16-bit, this is like just as beautiful as like God of War in a weird way. I seriously thought that.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, it's like every fucking level. I was like, I have to see more. And I kept going through it. I was like, holy shit. And that yellows and pinks, man. I just always think of that level.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, and the different levels, like you were saying, they are so different from each other. Not just in like, I guess it's all kind of the graphics or the art, but they're different in feeling, basically, right? Like the one that you're talking about, where you're basically like flying through the sky, rather you're outside of the underground stuff like you were talking about. There's a different feeling you get from that. It feels more free or like less. It bears down on you less, right? And so that might say something about where you were at the time, right, mentally or whatever, and like playing through that part was more freeing for you, right? If you felt less trapped maybe with where you were currently, that sort of thing. That's getting a little bit meta and a little bit like weird and like I'm having a therapy psychological session. But I know what you're saying because there's a lot of times, I think we've talked about this in the past, but there are a lot of times where certain games or even TV shows, movies, that sort of thing, I'm in a mental state where I can't handle it. It's like, my wife, like a lot of people's wives, she's gone through phases where she's really into like true crime, right? And she'll be watching a documentary about, I don't know, some like dad who killed his entire family and buried them in like, whatever, right? It's going through like the whole trial. Yeah, it's like
that's
really, really depressing shit, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm in the middle of like dealing with my own anxiety or depression or something like that, I am not in the mental state to deal with to deal with watching that, right?
Right,
And it's
yeah.
just gonna draw me deeper into where I am currently, and I don't want to do that. And I think there's something to be said about a game like this, or playing a video game. Of course, is I would argue maybe even more effective in drawing you into certain emotions because you are being forced to interact with it, right? Like you can watch something passively. If you don't like what's going on the screen, you look at your phone and you scroll something that makes you happy for a little while, and then maybe you go back to it, maybe you don't. A video game, you don't progress until you pay attention to it and you make the choice to progress through it.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, but I'm kind of making weird assumptions here, but it's very possible that's
No, you might be
why-
right. You might be right. 2018 was rough.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I have no doubt that maybe that might be it.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, it's like, yeah, because I think that's one of the only levels that's kind of out in the
Mhm.
open like that.
Yeah, until you get to the very end, if I remember correctly, because like at the very end, you basically are trying to get to the summit of the mountain.
Right. So you're escaping. You're kind
Yeah.
of climbing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and it
Oh,
had the
yeah.
same sort of feel for me where, I don't know whether they did it on purpose or not, but it felt like I had kind of escaped this chasm that I had been in the game, right? And like now I'm flying up the summit of a mountain, doing crazy maneuvers, all these mechanics that I learned, that sort of thing, right? And I had the same sort of feeling where it was like, I'm coming, baby. Like I made it out of this.
Yeah.
And so I felt accomplished, and being outside definitely helped with that.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to bring up about the graphics, and like I think that I don't have a lot to say on the graphics. Of course it's a beautiful game.
Yeah.
Other games I would argue are just as beautiful. I think as far as Celeste goes, they did, of course, a fantastic job with it, but it wasn't my favorite part of the game, I guess.
No doubt.
obviously
No doubt. We haven't even gotten to my favorite part of the game yet. So.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I'm glad you agree there.
Yeah.
The only thing I had left on the art side of things was something that I really loved that they did was the way that they manifested different characters that you run into. They manifested their fears and their anxieties into the game, so that now you're interacting not just with your environment, but rather, I guess you are interacting with your environment. But part of that environment is that you are also kind of having to move around the things that the characters are manifesting into the environment. And so I think a good example of that is the hotel level, where I forgot his Mr. Ochiro, I think his name might be, but he has a lot of anxiety about his failing hotel. Right?
Yeah.
And so he's basically like the only person there. He's had to cut everybody, all of his workers, all of his employees, and so it's just him. And so this hotel is falling apart around him, and it's just like it's spiraling out of control mentally for him. And the way that it manifests in the game is they create these like dust bunny things everywhere, and
right, yeah, I almost forgot about that.
yeah, and so the walls also grow. So when you jump onto the wall and then you move, right behind you on the wall grows like a big like gross dust bunny. And if you go back and you touch it, you die instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are so many examples of them doing that in this game, and I really appreciated that about the art. Something else that I thought was really cool is when you go into, it's like the mirror, I forget what they call it. It's like mirror temple or something like that.
Yeah.
You're basically like you're dealing with, or at some point you have to find Theo, who's been captured in this crystal, and you have to pick up this crystal, and you're running around with him and trying to like fight off these things that are coming at you. But you get to one point where I think it's actually supposed to be the manifestation of Theo's fears, and around the perimeter of every frame is a bunch of eyeballs. And as you're running around carrying Theo, these eyeballs are constantly trained.
Watching you, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't remember if it locks to you or to Theo, but I think that the idea behind it was basically to like personify Theo's fears of having eyes on, like not having enough eyes on him all the time.
Right.
That sort of thing. Because like I said earlier, he's a social media person, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought it was really cool how
That's
they just
sick.
threw in little touches like that in the art where it doesn't affect the game at all.
Yeah.
Like the eyeballs don't do anything to you.
Exactly.
But manifesting it in that way was just like a really, really cool experience.
I don't even think I noticed that. So that's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah.
That's sick.
Yeah.
Weird. Yeah, like, and the only other like, oh man, and that like plays a part in like him being like social media,
Yeah.
like eyes. God, weird. Okay, I need to go back and like legitimately, maybe after this we can like go back and look for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like other than like talking about the most important thing in the video game, in my opinion, I did want to mention one other thing about like the style is like the animations for Madeline. It's crazy because like there's so much detail for a game that it's supposed to look like an old 16-bit game.
Yeah.
You walk up to an edge of a cliff and she'll like tiptoe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah. There's another thing, same vein, when you first run through, so you like get away from the crazy lady and you're running across this bridge, and then the bridge is falling apart behind you. And the music, this is the first time the music really swells up.
Yes.
Well, maybe this would be a good segue.
This is
it. So the music starts swelling, and all of a sudden, like you start to feel the intensity. And so you're running and running and running, and the bridge is falling right behind you. And then you get to one point, and then the bridge falls in front of you, and you start to fall. And then the game freezes.
It freezes, yeah. Yep,
And
I remember this.
It tells you like a bird comes in, and it's like, and it goes, ah!
Yeah.
And then it's a little speech bubble says, X to dash.
Yeah.
And so then you X dash up to the top, and like you were saying, when you land, Madeline, if you just sit there, she's sitting with her hands on her knees, breathing really hard, like like she's like really scared. And it's something that is done in. There's maybe like 3 pixels basically that they can use to give you that, and it's like you can see her like her mouth going like moving.
It's
like,
perfect,
up and down.
yeah.
And it's just like they took they put the detail in, in a very very limiting art medium to do those things, and I appreciate that.
And since we're about to talk about the most important thing that I have so much shit to say about, I'm gonna grab another beer. You want yours?
I'm glad you said that because I gotta pee really bad. So I guess we'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, you can stop it. And we back?
Yes, we are. Sorry, I've got it super zoomed out.
Yeah,
and so like it showed me that it was recording, but it wasn't moving, and I was like,
shit.
"What the fuck?" Yeah, but no,
that would have been horrible.
I saw it like just go boop a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, it's because I'm looking at it." Like,
yeah. Okay, well, we got our drinkies. We're ready to go.
Drinkies. All right.
Oh, I was about to say, did you refill? Okay, you're good.
I did. Yeah, I'm good to go. Yeah. So obviously the last thing here is I think we're agreed on this. Equal to the gameplay, if not exceeding the gameplay, and a really good transition that what we talked about before the break was the very beginning. You're running across the bridge, get to and like it's I don't even remember how it triggers, but up until then you have that really nice little melodic sort of environmental music, and it's like, oh, the music's nice, this is calming and fun, and then all of a sudden it stops and it goes hard into some really intense shit.
Hard in the paint.
It goes hard in the paint. Exactly. And I think that's something that this game does so fucking brilliantly.
Yes. And
something that I before we like really start to deep dive this, something that I learned today because I was doing some research on it. The artist who was in charge of doing all of the music, her name is Lena Raine. And
right. I looked her up because I was listening to the soundtrack.
Okay, yeah. So Lena Raine, she was the, if not the music director, then the person who was actually making this music herself. She's the composer. She said that she was using her experience with anxiety to inform the music that she was making for this game, which I thought was like, it shows in fucking spades, man. It's crazy.
It's actually legendary that you say that about the composer. I didn't read that. But one of my notes was literally like how the game's music is the perfect example of how it's making you kind of experience anxiety in a weird way.
100%.
And that was just in my notes from the gameplay alone.
Yeah.
Because I remember every time the music would be subtle, then it'd be like, boom, brr, it'd get crazy as fuck. And I'd be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And then you're moving fast. It's weird. You start moving faster. You start doing shit quicker. You're like, what's going on here? And the gameplay is also kind of forcing you to move quicker with the music.
Yeah. And something that they do really well is they, as you're going through, you go into a new environment. Something that I noticed kind of as like a motif across the whole game. you go into a new environment, the music is normally pretty relaxed, or at least it doesn't have a whole lot going on. It's kind of environmental, letting you get used to whatever new mechanics that you're being introduced to, that sort of thing. You need a low stress environment to be able to learn kind of how this new level is going to challenge you. As soon as you learn one new mechanic and the game has gone through enough time where it realizes that you've got a hold of it, right?
Yeah.
Like they already understand it, because if you've already made it to some frame, they understand that you understand how the environment works.
Yep.
And at that point, normally the music goes boop, one step up. And all of a sudden it's getting a little bit more intense. And you're like, okay. And the gameplay is getting more, you were saying the gameplay gets more intense. And it continues to do that, and it crescendos to like just crazy anxiety inducing, really intense music. And at the same time, you're going through an environment that is anxiety inducing and super, super intense.
Yes. And just so everyone kind of gets an idea of what the music is like, yes, I'm going to have like intro music is going to be from the game, but also outro music is going to be from the best track, which is Reflections, that one I was trying to listen to earlier.
Yeah.
But it's like this synthy kind of 80s vibe, kind of, or at least this is what I got from it. Maybe you got something different, but like I'm getting like a synthy kind of 80s 16-bit. You feel like you're almost like watching a movie in the 80s, but also experiencing like a video game.
Yeah, it's like
for the
Blade
first time.
Runner music.
Yes, it's legendary. It's so good.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how to explain. Like every track is special in its own way, but Reflections is the perfect example. And I think everyone and their mother who's listening to this should go and listen to Reflections, because that's the like definition of like the anxiety. But the song is slow in the beginning, and then there's like a part where it's really quiet in the middle.
Yeah.
And then there's the fucking pickup. Like, oh shit, it's getting crazy.
I'd be really interested to listen to these tracks as a because obviously when you're playing the game, it's not time based, right? They run a loop basically until you hit a certain checkpoint, and then when you hit that checkpoint, that's when it knows, okay, boom, go into the to the next thing. But if you're listening to it on Spotify or something, right, you've got like a 7-minute track. It's going to change no matter what you're feeling at the time, right? So I'm interested to go back and listen to it.
One of the things I did in preparation for this podcast was I listened to the entire soundtrack again.
Nice.
And so, funny enough, when I was like headed to like a store or some shit, I was listening. Reflections just came on the radio.
Driving faster and faster. Yeah, just banging gears.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew or not, but my car is actually wrecked right now. No, but it was crazy listening to it in a car, like on your way home tonight. Listen to Reflections on your way home. I think it's like 7 minutes long.
Okay.
But dude, it is legendary how sick it is. It was wild.
Maybe we should even take some little clips and throw them in here. We'll just like chop and then run
idea.
like just like little 10-second segments or something like that.
Yeah, I
just
thought about doing that. Yeah, I thought about doing that, like a subtle one, then like kind of a calm down, and then the intensity. Which the intensity one is going to be the end of the podcast. I already had that in my head long before we ever recorded the episode. I was like, this is the part that I'm going to have in the end of the episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's not enough I can't say enough about like how much the music plays a part in both things that we've like the main things we've talked about, like gameplay and even art style. The music plays the biggest role here
100%
to bring this game together.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that today. Again, when I was like prepping for this, writing notes, that sort of thing. I couldn't imagine playing this game without sound. Like, like there are a lot of games I could play it without sound, no problem. I really don't lose much out of it. This game, 100% impossible to experience the full, what the developers really wanted you to experience without listening to the music at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that this always goes back to a thing that I always talk about in gaming in general, and I won't go on a rant here to branch off of what we're talking about, because this is about Celeste and not all video games, but people are always talking about like the art of video games and stuff like that. And I think the reason to me why video games are so much more special than a lot of the art forms that are out there is because it's not just you getting a great story in a novel. It's not just you getting a great, imagery from a movie or the great sound of music. It's all three of them. It's like everything all in one.
For sure.
And you also get a video game out of it. It's a beautiful thing, and like it all comes together. Like think about it. Would Star Wars be Star Wars without Star Wars music?
No chance.
Exactly. And so I think that this video game, like Celeste is a great video game, but it's not a perfect video game until you slap on that soundtrack by, I forgot her name already.
Lena Rain.
Yes.
Lena Rain.
And I don't think she's done anything else, if I'm remembering.
So she did a track for Minecraft.
No way.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
Okay, that's legendary,
I am
actually.
like 95% sure. Going through like her accolades today. Yeah, she did a track for Minecraft. So
Okay, that's badass. That's badass. Music in Minecraft's great too.
Yeah.
I don't play it, but I think the music's great.
yeah,
But
but no,
yeah.
I agree. She's not John Williams, right?
Yeah.
Like, everybody knows certain composers.
Yeah.
and they're very, very famous for what they've done. Lena Rain, never heard of her before this, and the fact that she did this as her, like, at least from our knowledge,
Yeah.
as her like breakout thing is insane. And I think that's a part of that was the fact that, or the theme of the game, right? The overall theme of the game, and the fact that she could relate to it, and it became a medium for her, right? At the same way that it was an outlet, or a poem might be an outlet for somebody trying to get something off of their chest. I'm sure that for her, it was an experience where she could portray her experience with anxiety in the medium that she knew best, right?
Yep.
And so she got to do it in a way that was intertwined beautifully with an awesome gameplay, story, artwork, all of that stuff. And so I think it was just a perfect storm of different people all having the mediums that they knew best, and also having personal experience with the thematic side of the game.
It was, because even Matt makes games now. Maddie makes games. This was their second video game ever. I think Tower Fall was their Tower Fall. Is that what it was? They have a first video game. I think it was like Tower Fall or something. But this was their big hit,
Yeah.
right? And it's awesome to see so many people coming in and just creating this. I mean, look at how many games come out these days.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's hard to keep up any year ever. And all these people just come together and make this, I'll say it, perfect video game.
Mm-hmm.
And they just released it, and it's like made by people that no one's ever heard of. I think that speaks so loudly about the community of video games in general.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, we do have the Capcoms and the Nintendos out here killing it. But then you have great studios, and we have a outlet. Our first game we ever covered was Limbo.
Mm-hmm.
Damn it, that game came out in 2010 or some shit.
Yeah.
We have an outlet now where indie games are popping off left and right. And so these people and composers and all of this get to express their gaming and like how they're feeling and things like that in the industry with barely any budget, because they don't need to now.
Yeah.
There's just Xbox and Nintendo and Sony and even Steam have allowed these things to be put on there for like no cost, pretty much.
Yeah.
So the exposure of like newer creators is so much easier now, and we don't have to have people like From Software struggle for 20 video games to finally get a hit.
Right.
So
Yeah, and something a cool little aside also that I learned today was Celeste was actually a basically like a game jam thing that the two developers, I forget their names, but I guess they collectively they
Maddie, it's Matt makes games, and the lead director is Matt, now Maddie.
Okay. Yeah, so the main two developers I know, they basically were in a game jam at some point together. And for anybody unfamiliar, a game jam is essentially like it's a 24-hour event where developers get together in teams, and then they're challenged to make a game within 24 hours. And so they actually made. Did you ever get to the part of the game where you get to play a little like arcade game style of Celeste?
Yes, it's like 8-bit almost.
That's right.
Yes,
exactly.
yeah.
So that game was actually the game that they made in the game
so
jam.
Sick. I didn't know this.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
this is
So
sick.
they made that game at Game Jam, and then they were like, "This is a lot of fun. We should turn this into a real game." And so they ended up developing Celeste, and now it's a huge success. Just
That is
basically
so
like
sick.
accidentally.
Yeah,
Right?
that's so sick.
They literally came up with this idea in less than a day, which
Wow.
is crazy.
That is badass.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So something in the score that I want to talk about that I touched on a little bit earlier. I think probably my favorite scene in this entire game was that gondola, And I think it's
Right. I
because,
was going to ask you about this. Yeah.
yeah. So as somebody who's, again, I've dealt with anxiety in the past, this scene was so cathartic to me. And watching the progress, basically, and a huge part is the progress of somebody going through a panic attack and coming back down from it, because I've been through that probably hundreds of times, and I've never seen it portrayed in such a not poignant, but like such a real way, such a relatable way. And a big part of that, like I said, is the music. And so when it first starts, the gondola stops and it starts swinging, and then all of a sudden, going back to the artwork again, everything kind of like darkens, and it starts to close in on Madeline as she's on the ground on her hands and knees, and the music is super, super uncomfortable. It's very, very uncertain. It's dissonant, and there's a lot of like synth noise and like things going on where you can't really hear like a melody, and so it's very, very confusing, and it's very anxiety inducing. And then Theo starts talking to you, right? And he teaches you that feather thing. And you go through the little mini game, but as you go through this mini game, you can sit there forever, right? So like you can sit there forever, and the music will continue to be uncomfortable and anxiety inducing. But as you start to get a hang of this mini game, you start to kind of, I guess, progress in this mini game. The only way that you know you're progressing is that the music starts to calm down, and all of a sudden things start coming out of the music. The synths start to quiet down, and then like the whatever like percussion starts to quiet down.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it actually culminates into like the Celeste theme, or like one of the first songs you hear, where it's the very calm environmental sort of thing. And so the music itself is driving the feeling of coming out of an anxiety attack. And like,
holy shit,
dude, again, I'm getting
chills
just
you telling
thinking
me
about
this
this
story.
shit, man. Like, it's such a beautiful example of how Lena Raine understood what was going on in this character's mind. And again, as somebody who's gone through it, or gone through this same exact sequence as Madeline, the character, it spoke to me. And that, in combination with the feather breathing technique and all of that, was just like, man, like at that point, I just like set the controller down. Like, what a fucking awesome game.
Holy shit. Yeah, I don't even like, I need to go back and like kind of go through some of these moments again.
Yeah.
It's been too long, and I'm just thinking like I want to experience that again, like today, like I was telling you earlier, it's like sometimes when you experience things, your later self can experience something and appreciate it so much more.
Yeah.
And if it sounds like you got a lot more appreciation out of this game than I did at the time that I played it, which is kind of a beautiful thing.
It is. Yeah. It's cool to have these two different perspectives.
Yeah. Because I still love the game. And I love the game just because the damn gameplay and everything, the music and everything flowed together so well.
Yeah.
And it was like, a perfect, like you said, a perfect storm. And I was like, golly.
Yeah.
After it ended, I couldn't believe it. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as the music goes, I don't know that I can explain why the music is so good any better than that one scene.
Yeah.
I think outside of that, I basically have to just like take my hands off the wheel and tell people to go listen to the soundtrack.
Yes.
Well, listen to the soundtrack if you have no interest in playing the game.
Yeah.
If there's even an inkling of playing the game, don't listen to the soundtrack. Go straight into the game and experience it as the game is flowing, because holy shit, there's no words that can really explain why it's so good.
Yes. And I think, again, I'll do the comparison that I did earlier with Star Wars. The soundtrack for Star Wars is great, but it's so much better with Star Wars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, I highly recommend, if you're not a gamer, you don't play games, maybe watch a walkthrough of this game. You know what
yeah, that'd be great.
I don't support that most of the time, but
sure.
Please do it, because like the way the music plays and tells the story with the graphics and with the story, there's nothing. I almost think there's like no indie game like it other than maybe Undertale. You know what I mean? Because the way the music is in that game is
great.
We'll talk about that one day.
Yeah.
But Yeah, this game is so good, and top tier platforming. You know, this is kind of leading into closing notes, which I think is good.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think about all the time how platformers have kind of not died, but platformers are nowhere near as poppin' as they used to be, right? Like back in the day, platformers was like the hottest genre of video games.
Yeah, I mean Mario.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And you know I love Mario. Super Mario is one of my favorite franchises of all time. And so I'm always talking about like that. And then the 3D platformer was so hot back in like the early 2000s with Jak and
Like
Daxter.
Mario.
And like Mario, Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah, for
There
sure.
were so many great ones.
Yeah.
And 2D platformers even fell off, you know, the late 2000s with Little Big Planet and stuff like that. And so we stopped seeing stuff. We stopped seeing platformers as much, or just good ones, I should say. Not studios weren't really putting in the time anymore for that. And it's a lot in. I think it would be a lot easier to make an indie RPG than it would an indie platformer, because to me personally, platformers, the most important thing in a platformer is the gameplay.
Yeah.
You know, but you have shitty gameplay in a platformer, and nobody's probably going to play it anyway,
100%, yeah.
even if the soundtrack's fantastic. So this was, to me, when I played it in 2018, after playing so many fucking awesome games. You got to remember, 2018 was the year Red Dead Redemption 2 and God of War, and still Celeste did not. It wasn't just like with them, but it sometimes surpassed them.
Yeah.
And being one of the best games of the year because of not only like the themes, but like the way it was telling the story, and the music was different, and it was kind of taking you back to the old days, but also giving you something completely new with the indie genre.
Yeah.
In indie genre. And I fucking loved it for that. Seriously, I think it was in my top 3 favorite video games that year. It was hard for me for God of War because of nostalgia.
Sure, yeah.
But Celeste was just like the new. I always talk about this, but like this is one of the most important things in the industry is intellectual properties.
Mhm.
Something new.
Yeah.
We get so many remakes and so many like remasters these days. It's so fucking awesome to see like a studio, even if it's a known studio, coming out and kind of taking a risk and doing something new.
Yeah.
And this studio didn't really do anything before. So, and even though they did another game before and it was semi-successful, they didn't just make a sequel. They tried something new.
Yeah.
And that's Celeste. Thank God they did.
Yeah.
Because we're sitting here talking about it because it's that fucking good.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we'll talk about shitty games in the future, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's too many great games to talk about, and Celeste is fucking top tier.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the I guess like return on investment as well. I think of Celeste definitely surpasses those AAA titles, right? Like God of War, obviously, incredible game. But as far as the size of the development team, the weight of the developer behind them, they did really well, obviously, and they made an awesome game. But Celeste, like you were saying, surpassed even that in some ways, and the fact that they did it with such a small team, with I'm sure like next to no investment, basically, in my opinion, is worth applause, right, for them. So no, I'm 100% with you. I'm glad. So earlier you brought up From Software.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to bring up, kind of in our closing notes on this. I think that my appreciation for this game really boils down to the fact that they made it so incredibly difficult, but it was also fair a lot of the times. And something that I, again, bringing up From Software, something that I really appreciated about this game that I noticed was it feels like the game, even though it's extremely difficult, it doesn't relish in the fact that it's difficult. It doesn't relish in your struggle, basically. And instead, it's very encouraging. There are a lot of times, I think, like when you first start the game, the first thing it says to you is something like, "You can do this."
Yeah.
And it was like,
yeah.
whoa, that's like the first words they say
Yeah.
to you. And something that, again, talking about another indie platformer, Super Meat Boy, right?
Yeah.
Games like that Binding of Isaac, sort of games that are like super punishing, difficult games. Elden Ring is kind of, but going back to Dark Souls, right?
Right.
Like Dark Souls, From Software is basically proud of how difficult their games are, and proud of you having to struggle to get through the game.
And mainly because two very different things, right? Like when From Software were making Demon Souls back in 2009, their idea was to bring back the old video game style, from back in the early 90s to late 80s of Castlevania and stuff like that, where games were, you had to think about it. There was challenge.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of games hold your hand these days.
Yeah.
Celeste is the perfect mix, I think.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Where it's not trying to hold your hand, but it's telling you, hey, like, take a step back for a second, take a look at this. You can figure this out.
Yeah.
And but it in a challenging way. Some games are too fucking easy, and it literally holds your hand and walks you through it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a great example of that. There's so many games that do that, but like I barely play them anymore, so it's hard. Like, okay, great example is anything first party from Sony for the most part. Uncharted, Spider-Man, those games are fantastic, but they kind of hold your hand now.
Yeah.
They hold your hand, they walk you through the combat. This is exactly how you're going to win this combat.
Yeah.
Celeste is like, figure this out, but it's not like old school, like 1980s video games where it's whooping your ass.
Yeah, and something else that they did that I thought was really cool is, and you might not have explored. I didn't explore this myself, but I saw it as an option. Was the what they created as what they call an assist mode, and that assist mode is actually like you can kind of play with the settings in the game so that like spikes don't kill you or whatever, like the environment doesn't kill you, or you can set it to have like 2 dashes instead of 1, or you can have unlimited dashes, that sort of thing. So they actually you have to dig for it, but there is a way, or they made the game accessible to people who just want to experience the story, but maybe don't have the skill set to get through the game. And again, I think that kind of speaks to what their priorities were, right?
Yeah.
Their priority was to put out a game that would hopefully help people recognize something about themselves, right? That was their priority number one. Anxiety does not control you. You harness anxiety, and it's a part of you, and that's okay, right? Second to that was, we want to make a game that's challenging. We want it to be very difficult to get through it, and mechanically, it is a very difficult game. However, if we prioritize that above, the experience of the game, by not giving people, this assist mode or whatever, right? Then it might prohibit some people from learning a really beautiful thing. And so I think like you were saying, it finds the perfect balance between old school video games where you're forced. It's basically like, hey, you're either good at games or you fucking don't play this one, man.
Move on.
And then the other games, like you're talking about the new AAA titles, that are like, hey, maybe you should try pressing A here or whatever. And it's like, dude, I don't stop doing that shit.
Yeah.
They were like, hey, listen, if you want to play the game, if you just want to experience the gameplay, we will give you that option. However, the default is going to be very difficult.
Yep.
And I think that's fair.
Yeah. And I can't prove this, but I don't know if that mode existed when the game first came out.
Oh, really?
I don't remember that at all.
Okay.
And I go through the options before I play any video game, because I'm always going through to turn subtitles on and check out what it has turned on versus what it doesn't. Always change my map to fixed if it's fucking rotating.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I remember that. So I don't know if that was added later. I'd love to look into that.
It's very possible, right? It's maybe that they created the game. People were like, hey,
I'd love to experience this.
More people could benefit from seeing this story and experiencing it firsthand. But either way, whether it made it in at the very beginning or not, the fact that I think that if somebody went From Software and they're like, hey, Dark Souls 2 is a little too hard, could you give us an assist? They'd be like, hey, how about you go fuck yourself?
Yeah.
Like, you ain't a true gamer like the rest of us or whatever, And so I think that the fact that they don't seem to be so full of themselves, and basically force you to struggle to get through their game is a huge testament to the very difficult but fair.
Yeah. And I mean, and that kind of goes with one of my opinions about gaming is, if the developer wants the game to be hard and they made it hard, then I think that is the way it should be. Like, that's the developer. They created the game. They should allow it. I think the story of Celeste and what they're trying to do with Celeste isn't always just about how hard the game is or about just the gameplay in the first place, though. And that's why that happened, right?
100%.
Like Dark Souls, that's gameplay. They're for the game.
Yeah.
You
The
know what I
Dark
mean?
Souls series, Elden Ring, those are all like masturbatory gamer
Yeah.
games, basically.
They're not
right?
made for like someone to turn it on easy so they can experience the lore story. Come on.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's not the
'cause
fucking
it's
point.
nonsense. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, sure, it's deep, but come on, like that's not the point.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
this game, it makes sense that those things exist because you want those things. Because this isn't just a damn. Well, I do think it's a great fucking video game, but I mean, I think the message is just as important as the game is, right?
Mhm.
Like the message of the game is very, very important, and I think it says a lot. This was this was in my closing notes as well, but like it says a lot that this is a video game because I think personally that a lot of people who are playing this game are, well, I mean, you got to think about the world of gaming, right? It's blown up. Like gaming is bigger than it's ever been. But think about all the people who've been playing games, especially like millennials. You know, I'm not trying to throw, spice out there for the millennials, but we all grew up similar in a similar way. And like we dealt with a lot of anxiety. This game, I think, honestly, had to be, I mean, I think for sure it was made by millennials, but it's made for millennials.
Yeah.
It's made for anyone, really. But I'm just saying, like, a lot of gamers who are playing games today and who have gone through this game and really see that message and how special it is are from our generation.
Yeah. I'd say, I mean, a slight disagreement in that I think that, with COVID and everything, there are also
Sure,
probably,
yeah, no doubt.
obviously, big events that affect other people. I think my perspective, at least, or like kind of my tweak on what you're saying, is that I think that it was made from the experience of millennials and it's reflective, right?
That's a good point. Yeah, I guess rewording kind of like, yes, it's made by millennials.
And it's obvious when you play it.
Yeah, for everyone. Though.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That's kind of what I'm
But
getting
as
at.
a millennial, it feels like you click with it a little bit more.
Yeah,
it's
because
like, you're speaking the same.
we're part of the
language.
same crew.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, anxiety crews.
Yeah.
Rise up.
Hey, I get it. Yeah. And I just think it was a great thing. And I can't say enough great things about Celeste. When I think back, I'm glad that you brought it up to like cover this game because it's like, there's so many things I love like talking about with that game.
Yeah.
And every time that game gets brought up, the first thing that comes to mind is the music.
Yeah.
Because it's just so, I sometimes just listen to it in my car just randomly.
Yeah.
And it's always, so I have a playlist of music from all the different video games. And I think like almost every track of Celeste is in the damn playlist. So
I believe that.
I need to go look, but I'm pretty sure it's like every track from that game is in there.
Yeah.
And it's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I think my kind of final statement on it. I was telling you, I called my dad on the way over here. Today is Father's Day, and I mentioned to him that we were talking about video games and talk about the art style, the art medium of video games, and admittedly, his service seemed to be a little bit spotty, so I don't know if I heard everything, but it seemed that he was a little bit confused by the idea of video games being an art.
Yeah.
And that's fair, right? Like I think that a lot of people from his generation probably feel the same way. And so it's certainly not like a character flaw or anything like that. But I think that Celeste is a perfect example, from start to finish of how a video game or rather the medium of a video game can be considered art.
Yeah.
And that's what it boils down to. Like really just this game, if you were to put, one label on it, it'd just be art.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. And it's like a lot of video games to be considered art used to be like a foreign language back when it kind of like started, like with the early 2000s again. Clearly more video games were considered art before that, but like there were games coming out in the early 2000s that were really where people were like, maybe video games is an art form.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there is no question, there's no competition on video games being an art form.
Yeah.
It's just like today, clearly.
Yeah.
Clearly. Yes, we have the big blockbusters. There are things similar to like Fast and the Furious in video games. Call of Duty and shit is a perfect example.
Yeah.
But there's still there are things like this laying on the side and sometimes even free with like stuff like Game Pass. So I think video games is a beautiful industry, and there's so much awesome shit happening in the video game industry. And sometimes it's nice to take a break from the big boys so you can find some beautiful little thing like Celeste that turns into something so much bigger.
100%.
So I think it's a wonderful thing. And we no longer have to talk about Celeste because, damn, it's giving me chills.
Let's just cut this off and listen to some music.
Yeah, we just play the soundtrack.
Yeah, we'll just play the game.
Yeah, I actually do want to look at some shit after this, but yeah. It's beautiful. And yeah, with that being said, let's talk about where we're headed, what we're going to be covering next.
Oh, shit, yeah.
So, me and Arlo have been talking, and, clearly for my job, I travel a lot more than I want to. So I'm not always around, but we wanted to work it out to where we're at least trying to continue through the podcast. We can't promise when we'll release episodes or like how often we'll release episodes, but we'll always have like kind of a plan on what game's coming next and when to expect it. I sometimes we could expect it in like a month, but it might be 2. But I think it'll still be a fun thing to kind of get people prepped on what's coming next. Clearly this changed up a little bit from the first episode, but we're going to lead into maybe inviting guests into kind of experiencing the game with us. Then we talk about the game on the podcast, so then people can kind of listen and be like, "Oh yeah, I had that same thought," or "I don't agree with that shit that Liquid said he's a piece of shit." But
True.
Yeah. But I think that's a really fun concept, and I kind of wanted to end the podcast with that idea, and then talk about the game we're going to lead into. We're not going to talk about that game at all. We're just going to mention it. Of course, why it's getting mentioned is because one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. It's not one of my favorite video games of all time, but that's because another video game in the franchise is one of my favorite video games of all time. But I thought this was a good starting point for Arlo, but we're going to play Metal Gear Solid, the PS1 game. And yes, we're not playing Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake. We're going to skip those. We'll talk about that in the next episode. But I did want to say that is what's coming, so if you guys want to experience it. And the idea of the podcast in the future is to kind of have people join, like maybe have a guest every now and then for random game. So sometimes we'll have a guest, sometimes we won't. Sometimes it'll be a quick like, hey, I beat Celeste the other night, and you happen to play that, so let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of where we're headed. So.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we get a chance to do the original idea and go back and forth trading some of our favorite games, but I don't know. I really enjoyed doing Celeste, so I'm with you. I'm certainly not against it.
Yeah, and I kind of think that's kind of how it's going anyway.
Yeah.
So I think it's a beautiful thing, and
you're a beautiful thing.
I appreciate that. So are you. And so I think that's it for me. You got anything else?
I think that's it for me.
Let's call it a night.
Love you, buddy.
Love you.